The crew was bound to the floor, all of them trying not to speak as their captors slowly moved around them methodically, waiting for them to make one sound to justify the beating that could occur, and already has. They all sat there thinking about how they had gotten in this situation, how their ship had fallen under some sort of mechanical issue that they were trying to fix. But before they could get their engines up and running, they were boarded, hooked to a very, very large ship in comparison to their simple shuttle, and simply boarded. The opponents had bored a hole straight through the side of the hull in 4 different locations, all 4 of these causing massive, irreparable damage, as one of these bored right into the side of the bridge, 2 more into the cargo hold, and the third one actually cut into the engine compartment, leaking all sorts of hazardous material all through the ship. The ship itself might as well be chucked into a star now that it was so contaminated. So now all they could do was make best of the current situation. Many of the young ones looked over at their commander and almost pleaded with their eyes to do something. But their commander knew that they didn't have a choice. They simply looked up at the creatures that were holding them. From what they could tell, there was 4 different species. One almost aquatic, almost squid-like in nature. Another seemed to be almost, he was trying to put his finger on it, almost like a mixture between a sloth, a water buffalo, and a snake. They couldn't quite make it out as most of the fur draped over. Another one looked very, very insectoid. And the final one was just strange. It was almost like they were, except it was completely and utterly hairless, and quite small. This made its very large weapon look gargantuan in its hands, yet it still moved around with complete control over the area. They knew that whatever these species were they had just found needed to stay quiet and wait to face judgment. Eventually, the crew was stood up and ushered into a very large room with a lot of ceremonial banners around. Everyone was decked out in a way that they knew that this was some sort of ritual, some sort of trial. The crew was simply thrown down on the floor, hard, at least as hard as they could. It seemed as though the crew, this new species they had never seen before, was quite difficult to move around. If they didn't want to be moved, they wouldn't want to be moved, and you couldn't move them without using some sort of shock baton on them. Even then, it seemed to not work very well, as many of them started to say some strange words. It took a long time before they were brought into this area, and it wasn't until certain devices were placed on their heads that they realized that all they were waiting on was the translator to actually figure out the language. From that point, they could actually hear what was going on. The one in charge stood up from its chair and stated, "You are in violation of our territory. For the sin of trespassing, I can commit you all to the deep of space. However, since you are a new species, that violates our laws. And because of this, I am to give you trial. Now, which one of you is in charge?" With that, they looked around, and the commander stood up. "I am." "Good. You will be the first one to face punishment for your transgressions. Do you understand what you are being charged with and what you will be executed for?" "No, I'm not. All I know is my ship had mechanical difficulties and you guys came and bore holes into it. From what I can see, you're the one who trespassed on our property." "How dare you make such accusations when you know this is our territory?" "No, I don't. I didn't even know any of you even existed." "How is that even possible? Everyone knows of us. Everyone in the galactic community," but he was cut off as another one whispered in the side of his head. "Ah, so you are the ones. Yes, I see now. You are the ones who have just now made it into space." No wonder you do not know about us. Yet, you will still be charged under our laws as you are in our territory. What territory? You have nothing marked. You have no beacons. This is nothing more than entrapment. It took a few moments before the translator actually figured out what that was. How dare you choose those words with us? You have disgraced us with your words, and you will take them back before your execution. To hell I will. Everyone could hear the anger in that person's voice, as they could also hear the bindings holding the arms to the back start to actually give. They seemed to strain under it. You will calm yourself in this room. Calm myself? You're threatening us with death. How am I supposed to be calm? Then you will understand this. You are under trial for breaking our laws in our territory, and we will pass judgment. Judgment, really? Ju- this is just a show trial. You wanted to kill us before you even docked with our ship, didn't you? You wanted to blow us out of the sky. That was your idea of justice, wasn't it? Just kill anything that doesn't sit there and kiss your feet or suck your insolent thing. You do not speak to me like that here. You will only now speak if I ask you to speak. Is that understood? Not really, no. With that, a shock baton was cracked over the back of his head. This was enough to make him wince in pain, drop to one knee as he began to shake his head. A small stream of red blood started to come out the back of his skull. This was noticeable amongst everyone. God, you will not do that here? With that, the captain of the guard went and grabbed the one that had struck the commander and pulled him off to the side. With that, they realized that the commander was almost unconscious, and if he was conscious, he was probably not going to be even alive for much longer, as a blow like that would kill most species. To their surprise, the commander raised his head. Is that all you got, you pussies? With that, the entire area was in an uproar. Silence, everyone! You will be quiet here. And who are you to call us slaves? Slaves? Okay, I need a little bit of explanation on that. You want to fill me in? Felines of all species are our slaves. They have been conquered a long time ago, as your species will be soon. Right now, your own ship is going to tell us exactly where you're from. We do not have your exact location yet, but we will, and we will subjugate your planet. Really? Over what reason? Due to the fact that you had trespassed against us. Oh, Jesus, he said. Who is this? Who is this person? Never mind. So, let me get this straight. So, you're going to kill us and then invade us for just reasons that you're going to pull out of your ass. Insolent thing! You will now face wrath. No, if you sound like you're one of these honor type people, yes? Well, we are always honorable. If we were not honorable, we would not even allow you to be here now to plead your case, even though you dishonor everything we are by your sheer presence. So by that case, I think a honor duel would be it, wouldn't it? Maybe by representatives, you versus me. Would that suffice? You do not stand a chance against me. You are barely able to find your way into space. Oh, does that mean you're not going to fight me? It means I have no reason to do so. I do not need to prove anything to you. With that, one of the subordinates said, Oh, he's a freaking bully. Silence you! The young crewmate looked up, but didn't say anything else, but simply smiled at the one in charge. Insolent wretch! You will be the first one to face judgment. So I don't get a trial by combat, huh? You, how do you know of this? With that, all the crew looked at each other and realized that they had just hit the nail on the head and they found a way out. I I didn't know about it, but since it's a thing, I demand a trial by combat. Fine. I will enjoy watching you all fall one by one. Waving its upper appendages, it motioned to the captain of the guard. The captain of the guard looked over at one of the subordinates, said, "You, take him." With that, it walked over and had a simple sword and shield in its hand, clearly ceremonial, but he didn't have any doubts in his mind that the sword was ready to be used. With that, the young crewmates stood up. "You will understand now. You will face in honorable combat for your lives." "That doesn't make much sense now, does it?" said the commander of the crew.
"What do you mean? It does not make logic."
"Well, it's simple. You destroyed our ship. So honor dictates that you actually replace our ship since you decided to destroy ours."
"We did not destroy it."
"Can't be used anymore."
"Well, if you believe yourself so strong that you can face down one of our best warriors, then fine. We will place ship versus ship. If, by any chance, you are able to defeat our fine warrior here, your subordinate beat him, that is, as we are not so cruel or barbaric as any other race that we would allow someone who is already marked for death,"
motioning to the back of the head,
"to face someone who is fresh and ready to fight."
With that, the captain of the guard spoke up. "Cut him loose from his bindings." With that, the young crewmate said, "No need," pulling a little hard, and with only a slight hesitation, he snapped the fabric clean, leaving the bands around his hands and his wrists. Everyone inside was shocked but didn't say anything. And with that, he looked at all the fear and simply said, "Oh, you didn't know we could do that?" "So you gave us the strongest one to fight first." "Me? Bullshit. Guys?" With that, they all stretched, groaned, and snap, 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 snap. All the bindings came off, even the commander, and they all looked absolutely horrified at the idea. They looked over, and the young one said, "So is that my sword and shield?" as he saw one of the other guardsmen holding a spare one. Suddenly, the guard captain said, "No, that will not be yours. We will fight more modern. This was to be a delicate matter, and we were going to give you a handicap, but now we will not do so." This was going to be smart. The guard captain, being not a fool, realized that anyone strong enough to snap the strongest fabric they have like it wasn't even there would easily be able to wave a heavy shield and sword and outmatch any of his own people. So he wanted to give his own folks a little heads up by giving them weapons that were lighter to use, and seeing that this crew that they had captured was simply strong. Usually strong does equal not fast. And usually dexterity is totally out the window as well. They realized that any movement, any chance they had would be up to the speed and mobility of his own young ones. Yet the guard captain looked over at the one who was going to fight first, and he could see fear. The guard captain pulled him off to the side and began to take his ceremonial weapons away, along with his armor being helped stripped off by several others. And inside his hands he was given one strange device and another one strapped onto his arm, the other arm. And with that they walked over, and again, this time, the human was given the same treatment. As he was given the device to strap onto his arm, "What is this?" "Deflector." was all he received as a word. Okay, what the hell? And as that was being strapped on, the strange device was put in his hand. He was like, oh, feels almost like a remote control. How do I turn this on? And he saw a strange button. That wasn't a button. What the hell? There was a slide. He slid it down, and underneath was the button itself. Ah, safety mechanism. Hold on. He hit the button, and what he saw extend from there made him amazed, freak out, almost shit himself, and wanted to jump up and down for joy at the same time. Oh, you have got to be freaking kidding me, as he said with a giant smile on his face. The predatory grin suddenly made many of the guardsmen move into position to take the human out if he made one wrong move. But no, he was simply looking at it, being very careful, saying certain things like, it's not as warm as I thought. It's real nice. It's light. Maneuvers just fine. Then he looked over at the young one he was going to face. Ah, okay. One moment. Just give me one more minute, please. The guard captain was a little annoyed at this point, but decided to just let him have his moment, thinking that this crewmate might sit down and pray for his own soul before he was completely eviscerated by these weapons. The young crewmate simply put down after turning off that simple laser device, and then started stripping off a bunch of his clothing, eventually only leaving on his footwear, a single layer of clothing on his legs, and then nothing from the waist up. All right, I'm ready. Let's do this. Reaching over, he saw the power button, hitting it on his forearm, and then an energy shield opened up, taking only about 2 seconds to fully extend. Oh, yeah, he said. And with that, the rest of the crew backed up and started laughing, absolutely laughing hysterically. So, is ready? The guard captain said. Hold on, one more thing, the commander and the crew inquired.
What is it now?
Well, I just want to make sure, is it going to be multiple fights, or are we putting everything on this one here?
It will be one battle, only one for this one. If we decide that there should be more, there would be more.
Oh, so you're gonna do takesies backsies, and you're going to, dishonor yourself by, even though once my guy kicks your guy's ass, you're going to dishonor yourself and your entire crew. Is that what you're going to do?
You bastard! How dare you say things like that? It will be one battle, fine. One battle for your entire crew's lives. One battle for the ship. But I will warn you, he is one of the best melee fighters that we have. Except for, of course, our captain of the guard here, who is known throughout the entire quadrant of how good he is, and he will be known later as he goes onto your planet and not only destroys all of you, but takes your females and your young ones for slaves for his own personal amusement.
With that, all the crew snapped their heads over to the captain of the guard, and he gave them a smile and grinned, and then seemed to send off something that seemed to be a chuckle. The captain moved over towards his subordinate. The subordinate asked him a question that no one else could hear. The commander simply said something else into his ear, something easy, and then pulled a small, round piece of plastic out of his pocket and put something from it inside the fighter's mouth. Nobody really thought any of this. They thought, hey, close enough to a last meal.
Now get on with it already. I desire to see his entrails all over the floor as he screams in pain.
The young crewman simply turned on his laser sword and simply pointed at the one in charge. You're lucky this is a fight between me and him. I'd enjoy cutting your balls off. All he got in return was a strange look. Cutting my orbs? Was all he heard inside the translator. As they got ready to fight, they lined up, seemingly. The one from the guard was lined up perfectly. His form was absolutely immaculate to strike out, using the shield to block, keeping his sword back so that he could strike. Even though he couldn't put the sword through the energy shield itself, he could simply swing around it, pierce through the sides, the corners, making sure that he got some sort of strike, as any strike, even if not lethal, would shock the living crap out of you and not allow any of your nerve endings to work. To his absolute surprise and almost horror, the human, seemingly after shaking his arms to limber himself up a little bit, got in a very similar pose, but this time he swung the laser sword the other way. This was odd. How could he strike? And then, before he did anything, he opened wide up, swung it back around, and did some strange movements, whipping it around the shoulders, back and forth, around in almost a figure-8 fashion, and then stopping, and then looking at him, and then slowly bringing both hands down. And all he could hear from the others is like, samurai pose. The one in charge didn't know, but the captain of the guard was no longer grinning and no longer laughing as they got ready. Fight already! And with that, both combatants came at each other, swinging and bashing into each other. The guardsman was surprised that this thing that they had caught was hitting with such force, lining himself up so that every time he hit, he was pushing back and up, knocking the guardsman off his feet just a little bit. The guardsman using his tail to actually balance, whipping himself around, jumping all over the place. But the one he was facing would always keep the shield in front of him, making sure that there was no chance of an actual strike. All you could hear was zap, zap, zap as the sword bashed against the side of his protective shield. The protective shields would come together and spark, forcing each other to go backwards. There was such a burst of energy, in fact, that several of those watching had to take a step back to stabilize themselves. The combatants more than once ended up on their backsides as they scrambled to their feet. They then would go at each other again. This time, it seemed as though the guardsman was starting to get the upper hand, and as they did, he got close. As the shields clashed together and they jammed them together, trying to stop the burst from happening, the guardsman tried to swing down with his laser sword. The one from the crew blocked it, and they were looking eye to eye. The guardsman smiled. I have you now. I will kill you, you. And with that, there was a sudden screech throughout the entire room. The guardsman backed off, trying to grasp its eye. Reaching down, its large eye was closed. It was leaking some sort of brown fluid as it flailed around, not being able to see what was going on. It then used its other eye open to swing back at the crewman. The crewman was slightly laughing, but then charged again. And as they did, he spun around, knocking the laser sword sideways, whipping himself and rolling across the backside, and then putting the laser sword across the guardsman's back. The guardsman dropping to his knees, realizing that the shock was more than enough. He couldn't feel his legs, any of them. He couldn't feel his tail. He was barely able to stay in the position he was in. The zap from the laser sword was one thing, but the fact that he had cut so directly had actually drove the blade in. These were not anything from some sort of science fiction that will cut through anything like a hot knife through butter. No, you have to put some actual force behind these. As the guardsman sat there trying to figure out what to do next, suddenly a hand reached up, grabbed him by his head spikes, pulled him straight up so that he was almost coming off his knees, and the last thing he felt was the blade going right through his back, being forced all the way through his chest. He could see the very tip of the laser sword after it pierced through and was driven all the way to the hilt. He couldn't feel anything from that point on, but the last few seconds was the sword being sliced slowly up as though some sort of behemoth was pulling. It was so difficult to cut through that his body was being pulled off the ground. And then he just simply slumped. With that, the one behind him simply turned off the laser sword, and as the light faded out, the body fell to the ground. The crewman looked around and simply said, "Anyone else?" The captain of the crew simply walked over and simply put his hand on his shoulder. As he did, the crewman spit a long stream of sludge down on the side of the deck, and then reached up with his finger and pulled out the chaw, throwing it on the ground, laughing as he did so. The captain simply looked up at the one in charge. "Well, this is my ship now, and you're trespassing. Leave." All the guard that were there was looking up at their leader, realizing that if they were given the order to fight these things, these hairless things, then they would be breaking their own code of honor, and they would be breaking every oath that they ever made. Yet, how were they supposed to make it in a ship that was so rudimentary, so pathetic to be made, that just a couple of holes in it made it almost unusable? Sure, they could patch it up with what little they had and get back to their own space, but it would take such a long time. Did they have enough rations? What would they have to do? They waited for the command to go in. Many of them just didn't want to give up their ship. "Well, what do you say?" Slowly standing up, their leader.
"We will abide by the rules."
This made many of the guards nervous as they didn't want to do this.
"We will evacuate this ship, but we will take what is necessary to repair the ship that is damaged."
"You mean totally fucked up?"
"I don't know why it would be mated vertically. However, we need to be able to return home. Even you would be honorable enough to let that happen."
"We're not murderers. You have an hour. I suggest you make use of it." With that, they started to move out. The captain of the guard, however, was frozen in place. He couldn't abide by this. There was no way he would let the royalty end up losing face on this, even if they did know that the royalty would not be held account because everything was on had been recorded, and now they would be able to show that they did not lose the ship to bandits, but they lost it to an honor duel. But now, seriously, they have to return in that hunk of junk? "I cannot abide by this decision."
"You will, or else you will be withdrawn from your station."
The commander simply looked over, reached up to something on his chest, and tore it off, dropping it down. "Then I resign from my station." With that, he pulled out his own laser sword, no shield, and then pulled out another in his other hand. "I will face you now. No tricks."
"You go against me? Where is your honor now? You know the law just as much as I do. Stand down."
The captain of the guard continued to walk forward, not absolutely caring at all. The crewmate simply ignited the laser sword and turned on the shield. With that, the captain of the guard came in and began to run as fast as he could. As soon as he got within range, he tried to do a horizontal swipe with both, trying to turn it into a giant set of scissors to try and catch on both sides. The crewman knew that this was a bad idea. He simply ducked down and then shoved the laser sword straight up through the skull of the captain of the guard in one swift motion. With that quick, the captain didn't even know he lost before the body simply started to fall. All you heard was, "Oh shit," as the body fell down and the sword itself was disignited. And then it crashed on him. With that, the commander of the ship, or former commander of the ship,
You all know we have less than an hour to get out of here. Secure your belongings and enough repair tools and supplies. Now go!
and with that, they all scurried to their own different compartments to grab what little they could. Also, with all sorts of repair tools, they tried to get as much over to the small shuttle that was there, but there just wasn't a lot of room. The crew would almost be on top of each other for the entire flight. They're either going to be really close friends or really pissed off with each other by the time they get to where they're going. The commander of the crew looked down at the thing that had just got a laser sword through the head and was laughing a little bit until he heard, "Get this thing off of me." As it did, the rest of the crew grabbed the commander of the guards and simply rolled his body off of the crewmate. The crewmate still had his shield ignited and simply turned it off. And then as he got up, he looked the captain in the face and said, "I'm keeping this," as he held up the laser sword that was not even turned on. Everyone seemed to laugh. They reached over and many of them tried to grab their own from the captain of the guard, and then tried to grab as much as they could. The captain of the crew made his way towards the bridge. Getting there, he saw that it was empty. Looking through, he realized he had no idea how to read any of the panels. However, some of it he didn't have to. The navigational system was a simple star map, just like anywhere else. He realized where he was and how he could get back to his home station, how he could report to his own people that there was an invasion on the way. There's no way a species like this, that is so devoted to their honor, would simply take this insult and not come at them. They needed to be ready. But looking at this ship, how could they be ready? Then taking a second step, he looked at the ship. Oh, we can be ready. As the hour ended, they reached over towards the umbilicals. The boarding parties were finally on the other side. And finally, the last one to leave was the captain, former captain of this nice ship, the royalty that had the bad attitude. As they brought over the dead bodies of their fallen comrades so they could take them home, this, they said to him, was a sign of honor and respect to fallen soldiers. As they did this, the one in charge simply looked at the two bodies being brought across and simply stated,
Why do you do this? You do not fight with honor.
The commander looked at him and said, "No, but they did," as he motioned to the two bodies still cold and lifeless on the deck. And without wasting another single word, he simply hit the door and it slammed shut. And he knew that the umbilicals were beginning to retract from there. If they didn't pull away from that area, they're going to be sucked into space. But as the door shut, he could see the absolute vitriol in the alien's face. He smiled a bit and turned back to his crew who made it to the bridge. They watched at the direction in which former ship of theirs was heading. That hunk of junk was going to take a long time to get even to the nearest planet, let alone back to their home system. So they would have time, but they wanted to map out the direction. They needed this intel. They waited until the ship itself was completely out of sight and almost completely out of sensor range before they were able to move their ship. Along with that, there was a steep learning curve to a new ship that was all sorts of technology that they didn't quite understand. It was going to be a steep learning curve. The captain turned to his helmsman. "Did you figure it out yet?" "Yes, sir. I got this down. Perfectly good. I got it all." "Good. Don't take us directly. but I want the fastest route to Earth you can find. Yes, sir. And as the ship got out of the way, the one who was actually next to the weapons array turned towards the captain. Said, "Hey, quick question, sir. What did you and Billy say? I couldn't even hear you guys." "Oh, yeah, he just asked me if he should fight fair, and I told him, no, fight to win."